It began with a single announcement, one that no one expected and few could accept. In a moment that shattered years of speculation, Queen Camilla was officially named Future Queen Consort. What should have been a celebration of continuity quickly spiraled into a storm of betrayal, whispers, and hidden agendas. And at the heart of it all stood Princess Catherine, blindsided and heartbroken, forced to make a choice that would stun the world. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The shock reverberated instantly. Across Britain, newspapers printed bold headlines declaring Camilla's triumph, while television anchors spoke with wide-eyed disbelief. For years, the public had been assured that Catherine represented the monarchy's future, the bridge between tradition and modernity, the graceful heir to the image once carried by Princess Diana. And yet, with a single proclamation, she was pushed aside. The reaction was not quiet. People gathered outside the palace, some in protest, others in stunned silence, their voices carrying the weight of betrayal. Inside the palace, Catherine's world fractured in an instant. She had given more than a decade of loyalty, poise, and sacrifice. Every gesture had been calculated to honor the crown and preserve its dignity. Yet, when the moment of succession was finally unveiled, she was nowhere in the narrative. That sting of betrayal cut deep, not only because it diminished her, but because it diminished the future she had envisioned for her children. The corridors of the palace, once symbols of elegance and unity, now echoed with whispers too sharp to ignore. Servants exchanged looks, advisors huddled in corners. There was talk that Camilla's elevation had been in motion for years, hidden behind the veil of palace secrecy. For Catherine, every glance now felt like pity, every headline a cruel reminder of her sudden erasure. And the press seized upon her silence, spinning tales of fragility and defeat, painting her as sidelined while Camilla basked in new authority. The image of Camilla, radiant and smiling, contrasted against Catherine's restrained presence at official appearances. That contrast did not go unnoticed. It became the story of the rising queen consort versus the fading princess. William found himself trapped in the storm. As a son, he could not deny his father's decision. As a husband, he could not ignore Catherine's anguish. He stood between two worlds, both demanding loyalty, neither willing to bend. His hesitation only deepened Catherine's pain. She saw it in his eyes, the conflict tearing him apart, the quiet torment of a man forced to serve two masters, the monarchy and his marriage. Yet even he knew that the path chosen for Camilla was one that left no room for compromise. And so, behind the polished smiles and carefully rehearsed gestures, a quiet fracture grew. Catherine's thoughts turned inward. For the first time since entering royal life, she wondered if she could endure the weight of silence much longer. Could she remain inside walls that had now betrayed her? Could she continue a life where her devotion was so easily discarded? The question clawed at her day and night. But this was only the beginning, because what Catherine uncovered next made her realize this wasn't just about a title. It was about power, survival, and the truth hidden behind gilded doors. Behind the palace gates, Catherine wore her perfect smile. But her silence did not surrender. In hushed corridors and midnight conversations, she began charting her own rebellion. Not with words spoken aloud, but with actions so subtle that only those closest to her understood she was preparing for something far greater, a stand that would shake the monarchy itself. Her refusal was not loud, yet it spoke volumes. Invitations to staged photo opportunities celebrating Camilla's new role arrived daily, and, each time, Catherine's absence was noted. A gala here, a press event there, moments carefully designed to elevate Camilla in the public eye. Yet Catherine did not stand beside her, did not offer the approving glance that tradition demanded. Her absence was both conspicuous and deliberate. In those silences, she carved out her quiet protest, one that unsettled the palace far more than words ever could. Those closest to her noticed the shift. Once warm and welcoming, Catherine's demeanor grew more reserved, her conversations shorter, her presence shadowed by a guarded composure. Trusted allies whispered of her changed tone, the way she no longer laughed freely, the way her answers carried weight without detail. It was a subtle armor, one designed to protect herself from betrayal, and it revealed a woman no longer content to be sidelined. To them, it was clear something deep inside her had awakened. Princess Anne, long known for her blunt honesty and quiet resilience, began to show her hand as well. She saw in Catherine the same steel she herself had carried for decades, a refusal to be dismissed. Their bond, once understated, grew sharper as Anne offered quiet encouragement. In their brief exchanges, Anne's words hinted at old rivalries buried within the family, tensions that Camilla's rise had only inflamed. It was here Catherine found a silent ally, one who reminded her she was not as alone as she felt. The shadow of Diana loomed over everything. For Catherine, every newspaper clipping, every whisper of comparison, reminded her that she was walking the same fragile path once tread by the woman who became both legend and martyr. Diana's story weighed heavily on her heart, not just as a mother-in-law she had never known, but as a symbol of what could happen to a woman who dared to challenge the system. Catherine could not shake the feeling that history was circling once more, demanding that she either bow or resist. Meanwhile, Camilla wasted no time. She seized every opportunity, standing proudly at public events, her speeches polished, her image carefully constructed. Cameras captured her every move, and the palace machine ensured she appeared as the embodiment of strength and continuity. It was a calculated campaign, and it worked at least on the surface. Yet beneath the polished veneer, Catherine's quiet resistance threatened to unravel it all. For every photo Camilla posed for, Catherine's absence told a louder story. And so, the palace began to spin with whispers, rumors of rifts, stories of Catherine's coldness, speculation that her role was diminishing. The tension grew impossible to contain. She had withdrawn, but not surrendered. And in doing so, she forced the institution into unease. Those who dismissed her silence would soon realize it was the calm before a storm. And as Catherine withdrew, the palace spun with rumors until one event forced everything into the open. It happened during a grand royal banquet, where every jewel sparkled and every smile concealed a dagger. Catherine, seated beneath the watchful portraits of monarchs past, endured the unthinkable Camilla's crowning moment, staged as a rehearsal for her future. And in that instant, the betrayal became unbearable. Catherine's eyes told the story. She would not stay silent any longer. The evening had been orchestrated to perfection, but beneath the gilded chandeliers and polished speeches lay a hidden agenda. Camilla was placed at the center of attention, her seat elevated above the rest, a subtle but deliberate signal of her looming role as queen consort. Every toast, every carefully chosen word, seemed designed to showcase her authority, not as a supporting figure, but as the future centerpiece of the monarchy. And while the guests applauded, Catherine sat in silence, her face a mask concealing the storm within. Those closest to her could see the change. Her hands remained folded, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the spectacle unfolding before her. William, seated beside her, was paralyzed by duty. His gaze flickered between his wife and his stepmother, caught in a torment he could not escape. The man who had once vowed to protect Catherine from the suffocating weight of palace life now appeared powerless, frozen by the expectations of the crown. The silence between them was deafening, each second stretching into an eternity of unspoken pain. The humiliation came cloaked in politeness. During the introductions, Catherine's name was conspicuously absent. Camilla greeted dignitaries with warmth, basking in the attention of leaders and guests who had been told, subtly but firmly, where the future lay. Catherine's omission was not an accident. It was a performance designed to remind everyone that her presence no longer mattered. To the outside world, it appeared as a mere oversight. To Catherine, it was a deliberate cut, a knife disguised as courtesy. The press noticed. Cameras lingered on her expression, capturing the cool distance in her eyes, the forced smile that never reached her lips. By morning, photographs would appear in papers across the world, accompanied by headlines questioning her composure and speculating about the growing chasm between the two women. Some would describe her as cold, others as dignified. But all agreed on one thing: Catherine had been sidelined. Behind the scenes, her objections had been silenced. Days earlier, Catherine had raised her concerns, insisting the arrangement was unnecessary and humiliating. But Charles brushed them aside, cloaking his decision in the language of tradition. He insisted that it was how things had always been done, dismissing her protests as petty, ignoring the wound they inflicted. His words carried not reassurance but finality. The choice had been made, and Catherine was expected to endure. Yet endurance was no longer possible. In that banquet hall, with the portraits of past monarchs staring down from the walls, Catherine made a private vow. She would not remain complicit in her own erasure. She would not play the role of the silent consort, while another woman claimed the crown she had been promised in spirit if not in name. The betrayal had reached its peak, and Catherine knew that only action could preserve her dignity. What came next would change the monarchy forever, because Catherine decided that leaving was her only weapon left. Days before her shocking departure, Catherine met with someone few expected, a quiet confidant who knew more about Camilla's rise than anyone else. In whispered tones and hidden notes, Catherine uncovered the truth about backroom deals, promises, and the shocking maneuver that secured Camilla's future crown. It was in that meeting that Catherine decided she could no longer play the palace's game. The encounter was arranged in secrecy, away from the polished banquets and rehearsed smiles of royal life. Catherine had long suspected that Camilla's ascent was not simply the result of tradition, but of calculated moves that few dared to question. In that clandestine exchange, the suspicion was confirmed. Sitting across from her was a trusted figure, someone who had watched the shifting loyalties from within and understood the depth of the bargains struck. It could have been Anne, blunt and unwilling to bow to manipulation, or Edward, the quieter observer who saw more than he revealed. Whichever hand guided the moment, what Catherine heard shook her to her core. There were agreements brokered in shadow, promises exchanged not in the name of duty, but in the name of self-preservation. Charles had struck arrangements with senior figures to ensure Camilla's place was cemented. Positions were granted, allegiances secured, and dissent silenced. What was presented to the public as the natural progression of monarchy was, in truth, the outcome of calculated negotiation. Catherine listened as the details unfolded, each revelation cutting deeper, confirming her worst fears. She had been betrayed not by chance, but by design. The betrayal extended beyond her own position. Camilla had cultivated a web of loyalists within the palace, individuals whose futures were tied to her success. From advisors to senior courtiers, every thread of influence seemed to converge in her direction. Those who opposed her rise were either pushed aside or coerced into compliance. Catherine realized that the very walls around her were no longer neutral. They were instruments of power tilted against her. Each step she took, each word she spoke, was observed and measured by those who had already chosen sides. The most painful revelation came when the discussion turned to her children. It was not only Catherine's role at stake, it was the future of her family. The confidant warned her that Camilla's positioning was designed to overshadow not just Catherine but her children as well. Their roles, their opportunities, their very legacy could be diminished by the narrative being shaped. For Catherine, this was the breaking point. It was no longer a matter of personal humiliation. It was a fight for the generations that would follow. In that moment, Catherine's quiet anguish transformed into fierce resolve. She understood that remaining silent meant complicitly handing over not just her own dignity, but the destiny of her children. That realization lit a fire within her. She could no longer endure, no longer wear the mask of submission, while history repeated itself at her expense. She would not allow Diana's fate silenced, sidelined, and consumed by the system to become her own. And so, with her mind made up, Catherine planned her escape. But when the world saw it unfold, it was far more dramatic than anyone imagined. The cameras caught it, but the palace couldn't stop it. Catherine, elegant yet defiant, walked out of the palace gates, not as the future queen, but as a woman betrayed. Every step echoed across the world, a silent protest that 2000 day screamed louder than any speech. For the first time in modern history, the monarchy itself trembled as Catherine left everything behind. It was a departure that no one inside the royal household dared to believe would happen. For years, Catherine had played the role expected of her: dutiful wife, graceful mother, unwavering representative of the crown. Yet, in that single moment, she tore through decades of tradition and expectation. As paparazzi lenses flashed and crowds gasped, Catherine's figure became more than just an image. It became a symbol of rebellion. Her walk was not hurried or panicked, but deliberate, filled with a power that words could never capture. William stood frozen, his world collapsing before his eyes. Torn between love for his wife and loyalty to the institution that shaped him since birth, he faltered. Some said he nearly followed her, rising from his chair before duty pulled him back down. The hesitation was painful to witness a prince who longed to stand beside his wife, yet bound by the chains of monarchy. His silence as Catherine disappeared into the night became its own tragedy, one that would haunt him in the months to come. The staff, who had served Catherine with quiet admiration, were left shaken. Some wept openly, others whispered behind closed doors. The palace had witnessed many departures, abdications, scandals, exiles, but never had it seen a future queen walk out in defiance. In their eyes, it was not just Catherine leaving, it was the heart of the monarchy slipping away. The whispers grew louder with every hour, until even the walls of Windsor seemed unable to contain the weight of her absence. What made her departure all the more powerful was its symbolism. Catherine left behind not just a palace, but the trappings of royalty itself. Jewels that had once defined her place in history were abandoned. Titles that carried centuries of prestige were discarded in silence. She carried with her nothing but conviction, and in doing so, she struck a blow deeper than any political maneuver. She had shown the world that crowns and diamonds meant nothing without respect, loyalty, and truth. Beyond the palace gates, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Images of Catherine's walk flooded social media, igniting a global firestorm. Hashtags trended across continents, with one phrase echoing louder than the rest: Catherine betrayed. It became more than a story. It became a movement. Supporters rallied behind her, critics of the monarchy found new fuel, and the crown itself seemed suddenly fragile. The people who once admired her for her grace now revered her for her courage. And yet, beneath the heartbreak and shock, lay a deeper truth. Catherine's departure was not only personal, it was political. Her choice to walk out challenged not just Camilla's rise, but the very foundation upon which the monarchy stood. In leaving, she raised questions no one in power wanted to ask. What is loyalty worth when betrayal festers inside the walls of tradition? What is a crown without the trust of those it rests upon? And while Catherine's exit shook the world, what followed exposed the monarchy's darkest secrets. The moment Catherine stepped outside the palace, the world erupted. Streets filled with protesters, newspapers screamed betrayal, and nations questioned the monarchy's very future. The image of a crying William and a triumphant Camilla was splashed across every front page. The royal family thought they could contain the fallout, but they underestimated Catherine's influence. Within hours, international headlines drew comparisons that could not be ignored. Across Europe, across the Americas, across the Commonwealth itself, Catherine was being framed as the new Diana, a woman wronged by the institution, a figure of grace turned symbol of defiance. The press revisited Diana's own struggles, weaving Catherine's departure into a haunting continuation of a legacy the monarchy had never fully confronted. To the public, Catherine was no longer just a royal. She had become a mirror of history, a reminder of wounds that had never healed. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds swelled in numbers unseen in decades. Ordinary citizens, moved by what they witnessed, carried signs demanding justice for Catherine. Their chants echoed through London, a roar of discontent shaking the very gates that had once symbolized stability. For every chant of support for Catherine, there was a silent accusation against the monarchy itself. The people were no longer whispering, they were demanding answers. Behind closed doors, political leaders wrestled with the chaos. Some questioned Charles's judgment openly, though in hushed tones, fearing the ripple effects of challenging the crown. Could a monarch who allowed such fracture truly lead the nation forward? Others feared that this moment revealed that the royal family's internal conflicts had become a matter of state. What was once private drama now stood as a public crisis with global consequences. On social media, Catherine's influence soared beyond anything the monarchy could control. Images of her walkout went viral. Videos of her silent defiance shared millions of times, her name trending as a beacon of courage. She was no longer bound by palace press releases or staged interviews. She belonged to the people now, their voices carrying her further than the crown could ever have imagined. Hashtags painted her as the heroine who stood against betrayal, as a woman of dignity who refused to be erased. The monarchy's iron grip on narrative had slipped through its fingers. Yet Camilla's camp was not silent. Her supporters, well-prepared and calculating, pushed their own narrative. They framed Catherine as impulsive, rebellious, and dangerous to the stability of the monarchy. Camilla, in their telling, represented strength, continuity, and composure in the face of turmoil. It was a war of images, a battle of stories, and the palace machine worked tirelessly to uphold the appearance of order. But the truth was undeniable. The balance of power had shifted. Catherine had seized the world's attention, and no counterstatement could bury that reality. Still, this storm was not the end. Beneath the noise, Catherine prepared her next move. If her walkout had shaken the monarchy, her voice would shatter it. She knew the palace could twist silence into scandal, but her own words could not be ignored. And so, as the world braced itself for the next chapter, one truth became clear. Her battle was far from over. Because just when it seemed the storm had peaked, Catherine returned, and this time, she had a message no one could ignore. With the world watching, Catherine broke her silence. In a tearful but powerful statement, she revealed the truth. Her years of sacrifice, her quiet endurance, and the devastating betrayal that forced her to walk away. Every word was laced with pain, but also with strength. And as she spoke, the monarchy's carefully crafted facade began to crumble. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she reached for the heart of her story. Catherine admitted that she had lived for years beneath the shadow of Diana, carrying the weight of expectation, comparison, and memory. She confessed that she had tried to honor that legacy with dignity, to embody the compassion and grace that Diana had left behind. Yet, in the process, she had been forced to suppress her own pain, to smile through the whispers, to bow her head even as her heart broke. The world saw the perfect princess, but only Catherine knew the cost of maintaining that image. She declared that her choice to walk away was not born of weakness, but of necessity. "I did this for my children," she said, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. It was not only her dignity at stake, but the future of the next generation. She could not allow her children to grow up in a palace where betrayal was disguised as tradition, where loyalty was rewarded with silence, and where their mother's worth was diminished to elevate another. For them, she chose courage over compliance. Though Catherine never named Camilla directly, her words cut deep. She spoke of forces within the palace who had worked tirelessly to sideline her, of decisions made in secret that stripped her of the role she had been groomed to fulfill. Each phrase was a dagger aimed at the throne's new figurehead, a quiet but undeniable accusation that Camilla's rise had been built on Catherine's erasure. The implication was clear. Her departure was not an accident of circumstance, but the result of deliberate betrayal. The emotional weight of her statement rippled across the audience. Viewers wept as they heard the vulnerability in her voice and saw the raw truth behind her words. Catherine became both victim and survivor in a single moment, the woman wronged by power, but also the woman strong enough to defy it. She did not ask for sympathy, but she commanded respect, her tears transforming into the steel of conviction before the world's eyes. As the cameras broadcast her every word, William's expression betrayed his inner turmoil. Sitting just behind her, his face revealed the agony of a man torn between two worlds. His eyes, glistening with unshed tears, spoke volumes of regret and despair. He had watched his wife suffer in silence, and now he was forced to reckon with the truth she unleashed in public. His clenched jaw, his restless movements, all betrayed the conflict within him. A prince, divided between family and duty, love and loyalty. Catherine's statement ended not with resignation, but with resolve. She spoke of hope, of rebuilding, of refusing to let betrayal define her life. And as her words spread across television screens and social media feeds, they began to do what no protest, no headline, no rumor had yet accomplished. They ignited something inside the palace itself. Staff who had served in silence found their courage. Allies once hesitant began to question their loyalties, and whispers turned into sparks of open defiance. And as Catherine's words echoed across the world, they ignited a fire within the royal family, a fire that Camilla never saw coming. The palace thought it could withstand Catherine's departure. It could not. In the days that followed, allies rose from unexpected corners, challenging Camilla's claim. A quiet revolt stirred within the walls of Windsor, led not by politicians, but by royals themselves, those who could no longer ignore Catherine's courage. The first to step forward was Princess Anne. Known for her uncompromising honesty and lifelong devotion to duty, Anne's words carried a weight that no one could dismiss. She made her stance clear in subtle but undeniable ways, refusing to appear in engagements that highlighted Camilla and speaking privately to senior advisors of her unwavering support for Catherine. Her alignment with her niece-in-law sent ripples through the monarchy, a warning that Camilla's path to power would not go unchallenged. Prince Edward soon added his voice, calling for a full review of succession decisions. His demand was not merely procedural, it was a direct challenge to Charles's authority and Camilla's rise. Edward's calm yet firm tone concealed a deeper frustration that had long simmered beneath the surface. For decades he had been overlooked, his influence underestimated. Now, with Catherine's departure shaking the monarchy's foundation, Edward seized the moment to insist that fairness and legitimacy be restored. His intervention gave Catherine's cause a formal edge, shifting whispers of rebellion into structured demands. Then came the leaks. Documents, long buried in palace vaults, began to surface in the hands of trusted journalists. They revealed hidden arrangements, quiet concessions, and strategic deals that painted Camilla's ascent not as fate, but as manipulation. The monarchy's carefully constructed facade cracked further as the public realized that much of what they had been told about Camilla's position was orchestrated. Each revelation fed the fire of discontent, making it impossible for the crown to claim innocence. Camilla herself began to feel the isolation. The courtiers who once flanked her with loyalty grew hesitant. Invitations declined, allies fell silent, and the grandeur she had enjoyed only days earlier turned into a hollow spectacle. Though her title remained intact, her influence was slipping, undermined not by official decree, but by the silent revolt brewing in the very halls she sought to control. Every smile she forced was met with suspicion, every move scrutinized as a sign of weakness. At the center of it all stood William. For years, he had balanced the tightrope between his father's wishes and his wife's suffering. But now, that rope was fraying. The revolt forced him into the most painful decision of his life. Could he continue to serve a system that had betrayed Catherine? Or would he finally stand beside her, risking everything for loyalty to the woman he loved? His hesitation, once masked by duty, was now unbearable, a tension that threatened to explode at any moment. And as the days unfolded, it became clear that this was no longer a family quarrel. It was a fracture running through the monarchy itself, a rift deeper and more dangerous than anything witnessed in generations. The crown was no longer united. It was divided, bleeding from within, and the world was watching as centuries of stability teetered on the edge of collapse. But the most shocking twist was yet to come, a revelation that would leave the monarchy forever changed. In the end, the truth could no longer be contained. A hidden royal document surfaced, revealing promises and betrayals that reached back decades. Catherine's exit was no longer just personal, it was political destiny. And as the world watched, the monarchy teetered on the brink of collapse, forced to confront the very question it had avoided for centuries. Who truly deserves the crown? The document shattered illusions. It exposed agreements forged in secrecy, detailing how Camilla's rise had been carefully engineered long before the public was told. Hidden signatures, sealed letters, and promises exchanged in the shadows revealed a monarchy not driven by tradition, but by calculated ambition. For Catherine, it was vindication. Every suspicion, every unspoken fear, stood confirmed. The betrayal was written not only in whispers but in ink, preserved in the archives of the very institution that had silenced her. The public's reaction was instant and unforgiving. Crowds filled the streets, demanding Catherine's reinstatement as the rightful future queen. Commentators declared that the crown had betrayed its people, and petitions swelled with millions of signatures, a tidal wave of outrage sweeping across nations. Catherine's walkout was no longer viewed as rebellion, but as prophecy, an act that exposed the corruption festering within. Where Camilla once seemed untouchable, her image now faltered, buried beneath accusations of deceit and manipulation. Inside the palace, the confrontation everyone had feared finally erupted. William, torn for so long between loyalty to his father and devotion to his wife, reached his breaking point. In a private meeting, his emotions spilled into words sharp enough to wound. He accused Charles of sacrificing integrity for convenience, of choosing ambition over truth. His words cut not only as a son, but as the heir who saw the monarchy collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. It was a confrontation that could not be smoothed over with protocol. It was raw, it was painful, and it signaled the unraveling of bonds that had held for a lifetime. Camilla, once triumphant, now stood isolated. Allies who had once championed her fell silent, unwilling to defend what had been revealed. The grandeur she fought so hard to claim crumbled beneath the weight of exposure. No speech, no public gesture could restore what had been lost. Her victory dissolved into ashes, her image recast not as queen in waiting, but as the architect of betrayal. The walls of Windsor that once echoed with her confidence now closed in, leaving her with nothing but silence and suspicion. And then there was Catherine. No longer the silent wife overshadowed by palace politics, she emerged as something greater. Defiant, yet dignified, she had transformed her pain into power. In the eyes of the public, she was no longer just a consort, but a leader, a woman who had risked everything to expose the truth. Her story had evolved from tragedy to triumph, and in doing so, she reshaped the legacy of the monarchy itself. The reckoning was complete. The monarchy, once untouchable, was forever altered. The illusion of unity shattered, the cost of betrayal exposed, and the power of silence broken. Catherine's walkout was no longer a single act of defiance but a defining moment in royal history. It became a legend, a reminder that truth, once revealed, can never be buried again. And so, the story of Catherine leaving the palace was not just about betrayal, it was about destiny, sacrifice, and a reckoning that history will never forget. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.